First of all, I would like to also apologize once again on behalf of the party for keeping you here since 2 o'clock. This afternoon, you are going to be addressed by the Director of Communications of the party. But before I do the introduction, before the Director mounts the platform or the podium, I would like to do a few introductions here. We have here some regional and constituency officers who have traveled near and far to come and support the event this afternoon. We have the Greater Accra Regional Communications Officer here, Alaji Sabu. Then we also have the hard-working Eastern Regional Communications Officer, Ivan Soseyebua, aka Chubul. We have a good number of constituency communications officers here. Then we are also being joined by the Deputy Director of Protocol, Head Office, Mr. Kwabna Frimpong. We also have the Deputy General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party, the person of Dr. Antoinette Tibu Dago. Then we have the Deputy IT Director, Stephen Fossen, also here with us, myself, George Krobia Sanji, Deputy National Communication Director, and then my senior colleague, Dr. Askidi Kukru, also Deputy National Communication Director, who double as the Dean of the Communication Director of the party. That much I do. Once again, you are welcome to the headquarters of the New Patriotic Party. Our Communication Director this afternoon will be engaging you on some critical and pressing national issues. At this juncture, I humbly invite to the podium Dr. Richard Anyaba to take over. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the headquarters of the New Patriotic Party. We call you today to address some troubling matters to do with the actions and inactions of the John Dramani Mahama administration that threatens the democratic rights and contribute to the grave worsening of the fight against galamsey in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 general election was a pivotal election because a lot was at stake. There was the need to sustain the economic recovery that began in 2023, to eliminate the worsening or the state of galamsey in our country, to improve infrastructure and create more jobs for our young people. It was a difficult fight that Ghanaians faced, and while we, the New Patriotic Party, was hopeful to win that election, given the programs and policies in our manifestos, we lost the election to the National Democratic Congress, led by John Dramani Mahama, who at the time we won, that did not have a clear-cut plan to tackle the challenges confronting us. 3 months into the presidency of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, Ghana faces a regressive resetting agenda that we must all stand together to fight in the interest of protecting our environment and the rights of our people in this country. In essence, to save our democracy against the grave incursions on the rights of our citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have observed so far from the NDC government is a regression in civil rights and human rights of citizens, and the efforts to fight illegal mining worsening as the NDC members, emboldened by the subtle promises of the campaign, as the NDC campaign, emboldened and are now going out and raping our forest cover with impunity. Ladies and gentlemen, holding people accountable, that is former government appointees and officials accountable, is an ingrained value, is an ingrained system, or is an ingrained value of the New Patriotic Party. We believe in holding public servants or people who have been appointed to take public office accountable. That commitment led us to the establishment of the Special Prosecutor's Office and increased funding for the Auditor General whilst we're in office to increase their efficiency and effectiveness. In other words, we believe in accountability. Therefore, we are not averse to the fight or genuine efforts aimed at holding people accountable, and including members of our government accountable for their service. However, we are concerned about the evident violation of citizens' democratic rights and the clear strategy of the John Dramani Mahama administration to try individuals accused of potential acts of corruption in the media rather than in the courtrooms. This is not prosecution, it is persecution. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is not interested. The John Dramani Mahama government is not interested in prosecuting corruption, but one of its landmark decisions since coming into office was by the Attorney General issuing nolle prosequam to clear all NDC members standing trial. And I'm sure all of you are aware of this. They cleared every single member of the John Dramani Mahama former administration, cleared them of all wrongdoings, and they walked free. This is no evidence. This shows clearly that the government is not committed to fighting corruption. That was the first action they have taken, and this was designed and actually directed by the president himself with a clear plan to clear the path for them to target the new patriotic party, their political opponents. Article 19 of the 1992 Constitution guarantees the right to fair trial, including the presumption of innocence until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. The Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Dr. Dominic Ayine, an accomplished lawyer, is aware of this provision but have chosen to disregard it and instead engage in a media trial, presenting untested evidence to create an impression of guilt in the minds of the public about people he and his government accused of having engaged in acts of corruption. This is an irregular act. This is not how the fight against corruption has been carried on as far as this Fourth Republic is concerned. Many of you are aware that the Akufo-Addo Bawumia administration prosecuted some of the NDC people and jailed them. But those actions leading to their prosecution and holding them accountable was not a media activity. Some of those prosecutions, people criticized us and as though that we're not doing anything. It was only because those actions that needed to be taken to hold people accountable was taking place in a courtroom rather than in the media. And we expect this government to do so, and we're willing to support them in every way possible to undertake the prosecution of corruption according to law in the courtrooms, not in the media. Now, what we have seen so far from them is a deliberate act of inciting the public and trying to incite public sentiment against the new patriotic party by creating these media events to talk about people's guilt, to talk about evidence rather than taking those evidence to court. And this is one of the key things we think that we need to bring to your attention, because it is a deliberate act that the government is undertaking because it feels that perhaps it didn't have enough evidence, or the evidence it has against these individuals that it claims have conducted acts of corruption, that either the evidence they know cannot stand the test of scrutiny in the courtroom, or they simply are engaged in a political persecution to vilify individuals and create disaffection for the New Patriotic Party. And so the question we ask, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Attorney General is not going to court, but rather going to the media. Why is that? Ladies and gentlemen, the answer to these questions are one of two possibilities. It is either the Attorney General lacks confidence in the supposed evidence he has to withstand the rigor of trial in the courtroom, or that the media trial is part of the government's grand agenda to defame its political opponent, being the New Patriotic Party. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that it is the latter. Perhaps both. That the National Democratic Congress, the John Mahama administration is engaged in a plot, one, to defame the New Patriotic Party because he knows that the evidence he has cannot stand the test of any scrutiny in the courtroom, and so it results to a media campaign to create disaffection for the New Patriotic Party. And we believe that that's is evidence of his lack of commitment to the fight to reduce corruption in his government and also to hold former government appointees accountable.
All right.
As I indicated earlier, the government is not interested in combating corruption, but in persecuting and sowing seeds of disaffection against the New Patriotic Party. This is why the government has positioned persons like Richard Japa and others in key positions within the national security apparatus to use all means necessary to intimidate, to harass, and humiliate Ghanaians with impunity. Ladies and gentlemen, that would not wash. That attempt would not wash.
Never.
Because Ghanaians will judge this government based on its performance and not how well it has defamed its political competitor. And in the process undermine the rights and liberties of Ghanaians. The performance of this government so far has been disappointing, given the 2025 budget and the significant deterioration in the fight against illegal mining galamsey. Let's talk briefly about the 2025 budget. The 2025 budget is disappointing, and I'm sure all of you will agree, despite the generous contributions they enjoyed from the National Economic Dialogue. President Mahama campaigned to establish a 24-hour economy. And all of you are aware, we stood here many times to tell you that was a scam, but somehow it fell through the cracks and then we voted for them. Today, the evidence from the 2025 budget, you will agree with me that it's indeed a scam in the making. The 2025 budget, as you will agree, made no provisions for the implementation of the 24-hour economy. The only comment we hear about it is that sometime along the line, the finance minister will bring a policy proposal to Parliament for consideration about the 24-hour economy. There is no allocation in the budget for it. The government's priorities in the 2025 budget clashed with the expectations of Ghanaians, which is evident in the funding allocations for the programs in the budget designed to impact lives. It is unusual for a government that has won election on the promise of jobs and economic growth to allocate significantly lesser resources to support development in the real sector of the economy. The government has earmarked a whopping $2.711 billion for compensation at the Jubilee House, exceeding the allocations made combined for the following programs or shall I say, flagship programs for the government. One, the Agriculture for Economic Transformation. A total of 1.5 billion was allocated for that program. The National Apprenticeship Program, a total of 300 million allocated. The National Coders Corps, this is supposed to take care of some 1 million Ghanaians. A total of 100 million was allocated. You've heard about the Jumeirah program. A total of 100 million is what they allocated. And a few women amongst us this afternoon. The Women's Development Bank, a measly 51.3 million is what they allocated. All this put together is less than what the president allocated for his office. For the compensation, I'm not talking about anything else. There are many things that they've allocated for the Office of Government Machinery. But this is just for compensation of a handful of people at the Jubilee House. 2.7 billion. More than what they have allocated combined for these flagship programs that they said they were going to do. So from here, you can see that the government's priority is not the good people of our country, who they canvassed, whose votes they have obtained, on the back of a promise that they are coming to create a certain Ghana with a certain program of resetting to a better place. But then now we see clearly that they are resetting us backwards, and we all have to try and fight to resist that. It is not done yet. I have seen some efforts across the society, women especially, who are intent on fighting back to see that these promises, especially the promise on the Women's Development Bank, is realized. But I can tell you that with this allocation, there's very little that you can hope for. So ladies and gentlemen, how can this be, as I indicated earlier, with this allocation and the promise they made to us? There's a clear mismatch in terms of the commitment to deliver on these promises. The budgeted amount for compensating a small group of people, as I indicated, who are working around the president, is higher than the allocation made to impact the lives of millions of young people and Ghanaians at large. Many have criticized this misplaced priority in the 2025 budget. The Chief Executive of Agri-Impact, Mr. Daniel Fahine Akwe, a significant stakeholder whose view from his criticism suggests to me that he was not consulted, his views were not sought, even though the government is going on a spree, creating the impression that they are a very consulting government. But a stakeholder such as this has not been consulted. And he has come out to criticize the allocation for the agricultural sector as insufficient. Others, including the AGI, have also criticized this budget. What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that the budget is at variance with the expectation of the people of Ghana. The Women's Bank, as I said, also suffer another fate where the entire allocation for it is less than what has been allocated to the Lone Ranger Office, the Office of Government Communication, that sees a whopping 78 million Ghana cedis compared to the 51 million allocated for the creation of the Women's Bank to affect the lives of millions of women in our country. One potentially positive aspect of the 2025 budget, I must say, is the elimination or the removal of the 10% betting tax and the e-levy. By the way, something that we had scheduled to repeal if we had won the election. So if we take that out, the balance of the 2025 budget has very little to offer in terms of the expectations of our people. I tell you, the dissatisfaction with the 2025 budget is widespread. And so it's not a thing that you will say that it's a new patriotic party that is opposed to it or is not happy with it, but it is widespread. And as I've indicated, in the days ahead, we'll be engaging in conversations to do with the budget, and we are sure that Ghanaians will get to understand that indeed we have made the wrong choice in selecting the NDC and not the NPP. But for now, let me turn my attention briefly to the fight against corruption, galamsey. The fight against galamsey